Hello and welcome to Headlines. As the war in Ukraine is about to reach its third year, some semi-clandestine US-Russia talks to halt the protracted fighting are also gaining some momentum. President Donald Trump has recently confirmed that his special envoy, Kellogg, instructed to draw up a proposal to end the war would soon be in Ukraine. Whilst the new administration in Washington, D.C. is pressing for a swift end to the conflict, or at least to its current stage, with Ukraine's sovereignty over its eastern regions being increasingly viewed as a subject of transaction rather than a matter of principle, President Volodymyr Zelensky, on the other hand, is calling for tough security guarantees from Washington as part of any deal with Russia. It also would be fair to say that it was not exactly very reassuring of the US leader to float the idea that Ukraine might one day end up being Russian, just a few days before President Zelensky's scheduled meeting with US Vice President in Germany. Joining me now is Mr. Onur Erim, President of Dragoman Strategies from Istanbul, Turkey. Mr. Erim, welcome to Headlines.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
First of all, we know that, and you have been following the developments very, very closely over the past 3 years, Western leaders, almost without a single exception, have always been saying that they would support Ukraine as long as it takes. What does as long as it takes mean now, in early 2025?
I think a lot has changed for a number of reasons. One, especially the Western allies in Europe, have actually seen and suffered and saw the consequences and the amount of debt it actually occurred to them because of the war. So I think they're looking at this in a different perspective, and also with the U.S. presidency now being under Trump's rule, is actually changing a lot of things, and it's actually also changing probably the way the Western Europeans especially view the matter, and probably the way that they're going to act upon the matter. So a lot of things are changing. It is not what it used to be 3 years ago when the war first started. Again, for one thing, of how we'll see how encouraging they are now, the Western Europeans especially, on the matter, now that they have seen the consequences of this action. And also under the new Trump administration, not only the viewing of the whole situation is going to change, but also I believe it's going to greatly affect the Western Europeans as to their stand, against this, towards this issue. So I think in the just very, very short period of time, we may see some extremely interesting, swing of thought by the Western European nations on this matter for again, a number of reasons.
But do you believe that Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty are, at this stage, clearly transactional issues for the current administration in the White House? Because we heard some statements coming from President Donald Trump. He said that maybe one day Ukraine will be Russian, maybe it will not be Russian. It does seem to be in line with what Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said earlier about certain parts of Ukraine feeling and actually being Russian already.
Unfortunately, in the starting with the last couple of years in a number of different places, I don't know how much of a issue now is territorial integrity, territorial sovereignty, when it comes to controlling trade routes, controlling hydrocarbon transportation, or sourcing those hydrocarbon deposits. So I think if we go back maybe a couple of decades ago, these international terms actually meant something. And they actually meant for the international community to stand somewhat allied towards what's being done as wrong and standing by, what should be the right move. But unfortunately, the way everybody's, now getting used to these days, and I would say with his first term of presidency, Trump had a lot to do with approach to international diplomacy, unfortunately, is business centered or money centered. So I don't know how those terms are actually viewed anymore or any less than what it used to be a decade or two ago. So we may actually see some very interesting results as a result of this, and not just in Ukraine between Ukraine and Russia, in other parts as well. We have all heard what Trump has been talking about, for example, when it comes to Gaza. So I think those terms will probably have to be revisited as to their importance in international diplomacy.
Everybody is talking about some deal being in the offing. What are the key linchpins of that deal, as long as your observations are concerned? Ukraine demands harsh security guarantees, and also there should be some demilitarized zone as well. And also, U.S. President recently said that he wants a return on U.S. aid given to Ukraine in relation to Ukraine's rare earth mineral resources. How do you envision that particular deal, which could be attained? And also, will it be interim deal or will it be proper peace deal, you think?
Before Trump actually was sworn in on January 20th, there was a pretty good idea of his cabinet and of his key administrators. Now, one of the comments that I made, and I did not do this alone, a lot of the policymakers and presidential followers made the same argument that Trump will actually be be flamboyant in his practices in the first year. And I and a number of other people have shown the appointees back then. Most of them were not, of course, none of them were sworn in, but now most of them are cleared. The appointees is a very good indication to Trump's idea for his first year, which was going to be a very, very roller coaster, crazy year. But then, after about a year, as everybody expects, there's very possibly will be a very major change in his cabinet and his key personnel, and he will probably calm down on how he reacts, especially on international matters. We have a very old saying in Turkish, which goes something along the lines of, showing or demanding death penalty for the victim to settle for life sentence. So I think Trump is now just acting extremely, out of proportion in international diplomacy. I don't think he actually is willing or actually aiming to do what he's saying, but he has to make this big move in the beginning for the others, the international other players, to settle down for what he actually aims, which is much less than what he's claiming right now. And we saw perfect examples of this just a week ago when it came to the tariff deal with Mexico and with Canada. Just the night before he was supposed to impose, he said they reached a deal. The problem is those deals were on the table for at least a year and a half. So I think he's aiming for rational things for the U.S., but he feels that he has to untay the deal first, untay it up, to make sure that he walks out with what he actually wants. So as to what's going to happen in Ukraine, it's hard to tell, and as to how long this is going to last, it's sort of hard to tell. I would refer back to a great speech given by Richard Nixon on this particular matter. I think right after the war just started or right before, where he was making a point that the reason that Russia back then, 3 years ago, attacked and claimed land in Ukraine was inevitable. He said, if you put NATO this close up to Kremlin, this is a very, very obvious end result. So if we go back, one could definitely make the case that this entire problem actually started with NATO, which means the United States pushing NATO this close to Kremlin. So as I said, we'll see in the upcoming days. I'm pretty sure that this unprecedented amount of money that went from U.S. and others to Ukraine is going to be cut off, which it should be because it was just a ridiculous amount for absolutely that did absolutely nothing good almost for Ukraine. And that was part of the reason I think why this war went on so long, because it was an extremely nice, I think, funneling tool for whatever they wanted to do or whatever they were doing for a lot of the U.S. politicians to move money somehow towards or via Ukraine. So it's hard to say when the matters are centered around money, centered around gain of power. It is hard to assess things in a diplomatic way, in a political way, because so far with Ukraine, and it's still going on. Hopefully, it will stop. The main factor in everything that went on in Ukraine was pretty much centered around money for the last 3 years, around finances, controlling.
But I'm terribly sorry for interrupting you.
Sure, go ahead, please.
Some Ukrainian colleagues, some Ukrainian analysts that I have interviewed over the past few months have been telling me that deal with Russia will not be plausible solution for Ukraine because circumstances on the ground are not favoring Ukraine at this juncture. And if you do not have favorable circumstances, you cannot achieve a deal satisfying your needs. And they are expecting the United States and some other influential Western actors to ramp up pressure on Russia by means of some punitive economic measures to reach a certain degree of situation wherein Russia is so weakened that it cannot continue its war effort in Ukraine. And then after all of those developments, try to talk to Russians and achieve some sort of deal. Would it be fair to say, with all due respect to Ukrainians and their concern, that this is a bit wishy-washy, hurry, wishful thinking at this juncture?
I think wishful thinking is a very, very light term to use for if they're thinking this way, for two reasons. Number one, knowing his first presidency, Trump will very likely only reach a deal for as long as he sees the United States interest at first and the most. That's one reason. And that may not necessarily, because we're talking about Russia with huge deposits of minerals and hydrocarbons and other things and businesses. So it's very hard for me to comprehend that Putin would be able to offer Trump something equal or less than what Ukraine could offer. So there's a cutthroat business deal there, number one. And number two, you have to realize that although there is a lot of talk about Russia suffering economically for the last 3 years, to have come to a point of economical breakdown. Now, I'm sure both sides are doing their fair share, or more than a fair share, of the propaganda on either side of this issue, whether Russia is economically suffering a lot or not. But on the ground, we're not seeing that Russia is suffering, greatly to a point of break. Just to give you one example, there has been an absolute, sanction in Russia by U.S. for the last 3 years. I have not heard any American plane being decommissioned or grounded due to non-existence of critical parts. I mean, it's very obvious. So there is businesses going on. I'm sure they are not happiest. I'm sure they're losing a lot of money. But I don't even see, forget about breakdown, I don't even see the day-to-day life being affected that greatly. Sure, there's inflation more than usual. Sure, things aren't easy. Sure, some food chains have changed names. They're serving the same food. But I don't think it's life going on just a bit harder. Nothing. I don't see much being changed in the streets of Moscow, to be honest with you.
Well, it looks like the sanctions have not proven to be as crippling as they have perhaps intended to be. And also Russia has been doing a very good job in terms of circumventing sanctions levied against it by means of using some other partners and countries. But thank you very much indeed for your time and for your answers.
Thank you.
Most grateful. Well, this was Onur Erim, president of the Dragamon Strategies, who joined us from Istanbul, Turkey. See you very soon.